welcome to Retraction. I'm your co-host, Antoine.
I'm Jamie, and we are reversing course through discourse. A friendly reminder to our returning retractors, please like and subscribe. If you have already, thank you. And if this is your first time joining us, thanks. Appreciate it. And we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the last episode of Black History Month. It's over. This is it. We can't do anymore. No more blackness from here on out. This is the end. You just get me. You just get me. But no more talk. No more talk on the history.
No more historical content.
Not until 2024. A whole year has to go by. We're impossible. That's impossible to do that. But that's what the month say.
But that's the implication, right? You get 1 month.
Exactly. You get 1 month.
And then it's like, what? I don't know anything about fashion, but then it's like, what? Wearing white after Labor Day? You're just not supposed to do it?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's sort of like, I guess it becomes like overkill. It's like, oh my God, not that history again. More white history, please.
So, what do you have in store for us today?
I have a treat. So basically, I have it's like the end cap to the first episode that we did, where we started with the size of Africa. And now this is a little bit more into the history of colonialism, but super zoomed in on one particular event within that period of world history. And I hope you've buckled up, because I got a whopper.
Hold on to your butts.
Got a whopper of a tail. Anytime we could use that, it's always a good time. Okay. So, are you familiar with the history of Ethiopia?
I mean, I'm sure the answer relevant to what you're about to go into is no. I know tidbits. I know they have claims to some religious history.
They do. Yep. That's it. We're going to cover a little bit of that.
Okay. Yeah. Like I know a little bit. I know enough to probably get me in trouble. Enough to speak confidently and be totally wrong. Gotcha.
Well, I mean, you're doing better. I mean, I'm sure. Look, I mean, listeners, I know you're educated people. I know that you're into the world affairs. You like this podcast. But look, you mentioned Ethiopia. The first thing that conjured into most people's minds is, what was her name? Like Sally Field, the 90s commercial. Go out to Somalia. It's just a bunch of children covered in flies. $1 a day support something, relief for the nation of Ethiopia and Somalia. I mean, that's the running, lexicon. That's the historical narrative.
Did South Park do an episode on that too?
They did too.
Ago?
Yep.
Right?
South Park did an episode on that as well. So I'm just saying, no one should feel bad if that is the first image that gets conjured, because media influences the way in which we see the world, and you can't help it. That's most likely going to be the reference point for, especially if you're an American, when you think of Ethiopia or you think of Somalia. It's either going to be pirates. What was that movie with Saving Private Ryan? The guy in Saving Private Ryan. He's a really famous actor. I really feel like you should get this.
Matt Damon? Tom
Hanks. Jesus. Yeah.
Pirates. What are you talking about? Pirates?
Captain. What was it? Willis? Captain.
Oh, yeah. I'm the captain now.
Yeah. That's Somali pirates.
Captain Phillips?
Yeah, Captain Phillips, right. So I'm just saying, that's what media's portrayal of the country usually happens to be over here at America. I don't want to talk for the majority of the West, but when you think of America, that's really what you're going to be thinking of. So I'm going to give you a completely different narrative. I'm going to give you a completely different context right now. So hold on to your butts. Ethiopia and the resistance to imperialism. That's the title of this little piece here.
Did you come up with that title?
I came up with that little title. Yeah, sure.
Oh, wow.
It's a title of our event. It's the title of this because it's an episode. It's a special, so I gave it a title.
There you go.
Okay. Now I'll be taking some references from excerpts from an article from the history channel, so history.com. It's the title of the article is called "How Ethiopia Beat Back Colonizers in the Battle of Adwa." I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's ADA. So if anyone out there, definitely correct the pronunciation. We always ask for that. Always ask for correction in pronunciation if possible. But I'm going to be, from here on out, calling it Battle of Adwa. A little background. Ethiopia has the reputation of having never been colonized, which makes sense having resisted colonization during the historical period of colonialism. It's one of 2 African nations to do so. The other was Liberia, which was created for the resettlement of free Black Americans, which is a whole story unto itself. Definitely say, listener, go into it. It's a very interesting story.
Or you can cover it next year.
Thank you. There you go. It's a Black History present or a Black History miracle.
2024.
It's for next year. we will do Liberia. All right. Hold on to your butts for that. Stay with us for a whole year. Come back to that. Okay. Now, let's set the stage. The year is 1870, by which time the slave trade has subsided. Europeans controlled only about 10% of the continent. The center of Africa was known to Europeans as the white man's grave.
Ooh. What does that mean?
What do you think it means?
That a lot of white people died there?
Yeah, white people died there. Largely in part to malaria, which essentially protected any further excursions into the heart of Africa. Did you know that?
I did not know that it was called the white man's grave. I did not know that prevented excursions, because you always see these people looking to explore any new frontier, and it just seemed like malaria was a thing to deal with. I didn't know that if you were an explorer, you're like, not to anywhere with malaria. Yeah. I just thought it was something they had to cope with.
Nope. It was like a protective bubble to getting anywhere beyond the initial coasts that were used during the slave trade. So for forays into Africa. White man's grave. That's what it was known for. That's what it was known as. If you look up articles, periodicals for the time, that's what it would have been called. So we're not just creating that out of thin, out of hindsight. At the time, that's what it was called.
I can't see that being in my 4th grade social studies book.
That's unfortunate. Ron Santos. I mean, he's probably the guy. That's what he's trying to prevent from happening. You're right. That's probably why. Or maybe he would see that. I mean, because it's not necessarily a pro-Africa thing. It's a
right. It's a great way to demonize.
Exactly. It's more It's more like, oh man, it was really perilous to the civilized man. So anyway, I'm doing a very quick overview here, but we essentially need to get to what historians call the scramble for Africa. I'll play a clip at this point from a journalist named Johnny Harris, who did a good video on the subject, which I encourage everyone to check out. The video is called How Europe Stole Africa So Quickly, and that's what we're going to get into.
Doing it. Well, of course, now the British are waking up. They're sending people too. And even the new kid on the imperial block, Germany, is chipping in. And now suddenly, we've got a scramble on our hands. Say the European powers, let's learn from our mistakes. Instead of the old days where we always had to fight over things, in this era of revolution and warfare, remember that we're trying to be better about talking to one another, coordinating. Remember? So it's 1884, and all these big Africa-hungry European empires get together in Berlin. I mean, there's this amazing painting of just them all sitting here looking at this big, beautiful map, which would be like an amazing activity to do until you realize what's actually happening here. You've got the Chancellor of Germany, you've got the OG colonizers Portugal explaining this place to Belgium and France and Italy, and you've even got the new country, the United States, who showed up. Kind of new to all this imperial stuff, but quickly learning how power really works on the international stage. Basically, anyone in Europe who didn't have an empire yet got in now. Oh, and crucially, they didn't invite any African leaders. And to be clear, this painting isn't like exaggerated, like it's not a political cartoon. This is literally a bunch of European dudes in a room in Berlin in 1884 discussing and coordinating how they're going to carve up and take this continent. And they decided that there was going to be one big rule for this new scramble for Africa. No pretending. None of this only on the map fake imperialism thing that the Pope arranged for Spain and Portugal a few hundred years previous. You actually have to control the land if you're going to claim it. So they divide up the map on who gets what, they leave the conference, and they get to work. The French start moving in quickly from West Africa. The British begin taking over Sudan and expanding north from down here in South Africa to take over all of this land. The Germans really start establishing themselves here and over here. Italy starts occupying all this land up here in the north and east. And Leopold, well, he got his colony. 77 times the size of Belgium. Here it was as a blank canvas when they first started exploring in 1880. Here it is 14 years later. Little Belgium down here, giant Congo up here. The blueprint has filled out. The conquest is complete. With his new colony, King Leopold, of course, went on to do horrible things, exploiting, pillaging the resources from this place, and wreaking horrible havoc on the people. And it is horrific and it is horrendous. Okay, all of these empires were carving up this map, coming in, mapping it very beautifully. It's like literally the opposite of what it was. It was unknown and now it's totally known. Pillaging the resources, bringing it back home, making record profits, etc., etc. And all of this carving, it happened really fast.
So it wasn't organic, it wasn't incremental, it didn't happen over time. This was very planned, deliberate, and expedited.
That's exactly right. Which I wanted to answer. That's the question you asked in the first episode we covered, where in how big is Africa? You were saying, how did they do this? Was it manipulation, talking to local leaders, and then turning everyone on each other, or then over time picking apart whoever was left? It was a coordinated effort that happened at the exact same time.
Well, he kind of touched on it, and it goes back to the example. I'm like, did they do what they did in South America? And the answer is no. They learned. Those were the mistakes they learned from. They learned from those mistakes.
That's exactly right. Because he mentions it again with the Pope in terms of like it had to be boots on the ground. None of this like colony stuff. It had to be like this African land is now a part of our country.
Wow. And I saw it sounded like they were focusing on Leopold, so I assume the video was centered around Belgium.
It starts with Belgium because Leopold kicks it off because he's the first one after essentially the cure or vaccine for malaria becomes developed. He's the first one to make inroads into Africa because he's one of the few that didn't have a foothold in Africa on the back of the slave trade, essentially. Mm-hmm. So he goes straight for the heart of Africa, which again, white man's grave. Now they have protection to create his colony because that's where no white man had been before.
And so I don't know if you know this, not to put you on the spot, or if the video touched on it. That meeting, the painting that they were referring to, that was 1870?
It was I think he said it, 1884.
1884.
Yeah.
And then when, not necessarily when did it all end, because I don't know if you can put a fine point on that, but when for the most part were stakes claimed after they drew out, not necessarily when the land was fully conquered and developed, but at what point, whatever they divvied up amongst themselves, how many years did it take for them to say like, okay, we got solid footing.
I think the period of this initial first colonialism, and I mean, look, I'm not a historian, so we definitely, listener, correct me if I'm wrong, but I like to put it right before the First World War. And the reason I can do that, at least with some confidence.
What was that, 1914?
1914, yeah. And the reason I could do that with some confidence is because at that point in the world wars, you start to get some major, not decisions, some major dissenting from African countries that had been colonized to that point. But again, we know, I mean, look, South Africa apartheid, when does that end? That goes well into what, the 90s? I can't remember when. That's in our recent history. That's a modern event. So
yeah, that's why I didn't want to get caught up to like how long it went. But yeah, that initial first phase, I think, is how you just phrased it, which is good. Like when did they get that foothold? As
colonialism in that sense, because after that it becomes a completely different animal. But I think it's important to make that
couple decades, huh?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and I'll come back to that too, because I that distinction is important, and I'll circle back to why that is at the end of the story.
And wow, I mean, just imagine having, it's not just conquistadors on your shore. It's not just like this one entity that has come. And I mean, you could think about it in any way, even European history. It's not just one entity coming into landing in a single location and then like sweeping across the land. You are just being attacked from all angles by multiple world powers, technologically superior in probably the art of warfare, and they are
not art of warfare, but I'm going to hit on that, the technology.
Oh, well, I imagined. So yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagined that the how would you phrase that? The weapons of war,
sure, have superiority when it comes to blunt force power in terms of weaponry, which plays a significant role in the conquering of some of the African nations, because a lot of those battles were then sensationalized in order to promote the superiority of Western powers and to justify the taking of the land. They were kind of, they were bolstered up because you got to tell a great story, not saying that they didn't have the superiority. That's a factual thing. But in terms of we are here, we're decimating these savages because they're backwards. We're bringing civilization to them. That's all part of the narrative history being written by the victors.
Well, that is an interesting thing because we've seen that even in recent warfare when you have insurgencies and you're like, the technology is superior, but it doesn't. That's not how you necessarily win.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. So it is a good distinction to make. But I can't
that's
imagine.
An important reference point. What you're saying is so important and important in terms of how you should look at colonization of Africa. Is that narrative of, we were just more powerful, therefore we won. You could look at our modern wars. You could look at Iraq. You could look at Afghanistan. You could look at Ukraine. Having superiority militarily doesn't guarantee victory. So there has to be more to it than just we were stronger and more and superior. And there's more to it.
I think there's even, it's not a counterpoint to what you're making. I think it's just more color to the situation. We have, at least warfare now is more publicized. And so there is an element of shame. There's an element of cruelty that there's still plenty of it to go around, but there is a little bit that holds you back, that holds a country back from being totally archaic. And I don't know what, I can't help but wonder, and maybe you'll counter this, but I would imagine back then they were just so much more brutal because there were just no check. Nothing mattered.
No, absolutely. I mean, he references, and again, everyone, I definitely encourage you to check out this video. It's a sick, 28-minute, 30-minute video on covering cradle to grave on how this occurred, because he even goes into the slave trade, the initial foothold, and then basically through the end periods of colonialism. But exactly, just like you say, he mentions. I mean, he doesn't even mention the British atrocities, which people are only recently hearing about.
Yeah, only within a year or so, I started seeing videos of documentaries of British atrocities. I was like, oh my god, especially when with all the stuff with the monarchy in England recently. Yeah. But why I was bringing that up is that it is even harder in modern warfare, probably, for necessarily superior technology to win a war because you're restrained from using its full cruel potential. Whereas back then, it was kind of like, these are slaughtering machines, and we will deploy them in every way possible. And it was horrendous. So I'm not saying that necessarily that technological warfare was even more. I don't know how to think of it. Help me out. Was superior technology even more effective back then because there was no restraint? Because it's kind of countering a little bit of what you're saying, but you know what I mean?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think I've ever thought of it from that angle per se. I'm going to maybe hold on to that question. Maybe we'll revisit it actually in a second. I got one paragraph I'm going to read, and then maybe we'll come back to that, because that's an interesting question. I think that what I'm about to say next, I wonder how you'll pose this question after reading this paragraph.
All right, let's do it.
So going on, Johnny Harris, the journalist that just referenced, he then goes on to explain a little more about the various technological innovations that aided in the takeover, which is very, I don't know if anyone's familiar, very Jared Diamond, guns, germs, steel, in terms of the way he encapsulates it. But I do want to caution here that one thing almost nobody mentions is that Western Africa and some extension Southern Africa, by this point, has lost 15 million people over the course of the slave trade. And just for a reference point, that's 4 times the size of London in 1870. So in this period,
that is such a good context to have.
Right. I'm just putting it out there because Jared Diamond doesn't. No one really talks about it when they talk about military superiority. Think of England losing 4 Londons. It's in a period of 400 years, and then someone stepping onto that continent and saying, "Wow, that was easy." We just walked through the UK because they lost 15 million people.
It's like fighting World War II right after the Civil War. you're just like, I got nothing.
That's exactly, yeah. That's a good reference point as well. It's like fighting. That's perfect. That's perfect. How
Because the whole world is coming down on you, and you were just sacked. Like you were, they squeezed it all out of you. They took it all. They took all your strong people.
Yeah. I'm just putting those numbers out there.
How many million?
15 million is the approximate.
15 million.
That's not people born into slavery. That's people transported in the transatlantic slave trade. So that's bodies leaving Africa
and people multiply
for the New World.
So it's like 15 million frozen in time. But what that would have meant by the time this war came to them is they would have multiplied. Like that you robbed the continent of so much, right?
So
they
much.
Get together and they have at least 1 kid, 2 kid, 3 kid. Like, you know,
well,
they multiply. And then you have these people growing up. Like, I'm just saying that it's like 15 million, but it's actually worse than that because it's your future. 15 million is the present.
That's a good point.
They robbed you of so much of the future as well.
Right. Yeah. I just think that that's such an important number that doesn't get thrown in when you talk about the conquest. But I feel it's integral. I think it's just, I don't know how you could talk about it contextually without talking about a lack of manpower, because you need manpower to field armies. Even if you're going up against superior machinery, that lack of just ingenuity, you don't have the people to build trenches, to I don't know, fortify lines in order to get food and to transport. You're just lacking so much in terms of actual manpower to resist an invading force, not to mention the entirety of Europe at the same time.
That's what's blowing my mind. I cannot imagine being on that continent and over a 20-year period, all of the major powers with the technology that they had up for debate as to how effective it could have been, but no restraint, sweeping across this continent from all angles with the sole purpose of, they're not trying to negotiate, they're not trying to trade, they are conquering, they are subjugating you. And that is like aliens taking over the earth. Like, that is your worst nightmare.
That's a good point too. It is like an alien invasion. It's like Independence Day.
Yeah. That's terrifying. The sheer swiftness and coordination. I mean, it's like a monopoly or what do you call it when a group of companies get together and they form a pact?
Monopoly. Yeah.
It's oh God, what is that? A conglomerate? No.
Yeah, I know the word.
I'm after a word. I can't think of it right now.
Yeah.
But
it's some sort of collusion, but
collusion. Yeah, it's like it's illegal in business, and the idea that the major powers came together. It's like this Illuminati type conspiracy theory stuff that you think of, where it's like they're all in on it. They all are trying to do the same thing. Like, they did that in Africa. The thing that everyone is always like, you know, whether they believe it or not, or fooling around about, and that there are a few powerful entities in the world that are controlling everything. When it came to the conquest of Africa, it seems to actually be really true. And that is the terrifying end to a scheme like that.
I wish that was the part that was actually taught, though, in history books especially. I feel like that is such I know I've used this integral, pivotal, you know, I'm using these words over and over again, but it's because I just don't have any other way to describe this, because it's never happened in any other part of the world. It's a uniquely specific event of collusion of the strongest global northern powers at the time, deciding we're going to carve up this country, this continent, in 2 decades. And I just feel like that would change people's perception, because you get this question all the time. People are always asking, why is Africa so poor? What's wrong with Africa? Why is Africa behind? Where do you think America would have been if after
coordinated effort,
after the Revolutionary War, after the Civil War, if Europe had said, okay, that was fun for you guys, all of us are now going to take our navies and descend upon North America at the exact same time? Do you think America would have stood a chance? The answer is no. Nobody would have stood a chance, no matter how strong your armies were at the time. Nobody would have been able to resist 6 countries of ample size, resource power, and decent weaponry invading you at the same time. Nobody would have survived that. It doesn't matter who you were.
it's just the story of even every world war where you just have a tremendous amount of allies coming against Axis powers and stuff like it. When the world's against you, it's
But at least
really
it's
hard to win.
I cut to an extent. I mean, at least you have allies. I mean, it's
What I mean is like when the world is against you, like you're not going to win. And they didn't expect it. They didn't provoke it. They didn't prep for it. It's not like they were like, oh, the storm's coming. Like
right.
they were still,
I don't know,
writhing from slavery. Like, oh my God, you guys like sapped us of our human capital. We need to rebound. Oh, here comes the flood of invasion.
Yeah.
It's so weird how it almost happened in reverse order as to what you would think, but maybe that isn't the reverse order. Maybe that is the order. It's like you invade and then you sap resources, but in this case, they kind of did the opposite.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Or at least they took the human capital first, came in, invade, and then took the natural resources.
I think what's also amazing, and this is not in the piece that I've worked on for this, but it just kind of came to me. They used the brain power, like you said, because it basically struck me when you said human capital. We also have to think of it that way. Europe comes in as an advanced invading force after having taken brain power, taking manual labor, taking all this human resource out of this country in order to enrich themselves. So they're coming in on the back of African ingenuity, because I could definitely say that, because we know for a fact that a lot of the agriculture, a lot of the techniques used for agriculture, for tobacco, for rice in Americas were African technologies. It was African slaves who were using what they had already been doing in Africa in order to enrich slave owners in the Americas. So when I say ingenuity, I mean it quite literally. It's not hyperbolic. You're taking ingenuity in order to enrich yourselves, get powerful, and then invade the land that sort of gave you your wealth. That's essentially what's happening here.
We covered part of this. We were just talking about, I don't know if we were recording at this point, but Onesimus, we covered it in our recent Thanksgiving episode. That was, I want to say, the early 1700s.
That's right.
Early 1700s slave. They take this dude, they wind up manufacturing a vaccine for smallpox. They didn't return him to Africa and share. It wasn't a two-way street with knowledge. Whatever this dude could have helped spur or innovate or inspire, that nothing was ever returned. And that's one example that we know of.
But that's a great example, though, because you're speaking exactly to what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And to be clear, like, this guy, he did create the smallpox vaccine, right? If I remember, he showed them how, like, the whole idea behind inoculation and stuff like that. Like, that is wild, because in this video, and actually we're gonna have to get back to that, because we definitely have to cover that because in this video he talks about he has a segment much later on where he talks about the innovations of Europeans on the back of the slave trade, almost as like, they advance science, they advance medicine by experimenting and doing the research that they were doing on these basically captive people. I'll get back to that, but this is interesting because it's not just that. You're actually learning from these people as well. But anyway,
but it's so important because it's not even a matter of like, it's not even like Onesimus himself didn't create it, right? He shared indigenous knowledge with the Western world. And that it doesn't even matter that he didn't create it himself, right? It was already previously known knowledge. The point of that is that it's a one-way street.
Right.
One entity is just absorbing knowledge from everywhere else, and they are not giving anything in return. Normally, when stuff like that was shared amongst trade routes, there was an exchange of information, whether it was a strict barter or just, people chatting it up.
Yeah.
Like ideas were exchanged. There was no exchange of ideas. Africa didn't get anything in return. It didn't even remain neutral after the interaction. It was just hemorrhaging everything that they had, while other people were just soaking it up. Yeah. And that's toxic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's it. I mean, that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
I mean, people have jobs, right? You talk to someone who's in a different department or whatever it may be, and they're asking you for help. You keep helping, but they never help you in return. It's kind of like that. It's 10 times, 1,000 times worse.
1,000 times worse, but yeah, kind of like that.
but like, in the fact that like you're not getting
Space.
anything in return. You're not like, it's just the most absurd international relationship.
Absolutely. Now back to Ethiopia.
Oh yeah, Ethiopia.
back to Ethiopia. Referencing the history article, a relative newcomer to the game, Italy began its colonial military exploits in 1885, when, with Britain's encouragement, it occupied the Red Sea port of Massawa, which is in Ethiopia, from modern-day Ethiopia. From there, it spread out along the Horn of Africa, establishing the colony of Eritrea. Butchered that horribly. Wish I did it. It's spelled Eritrea. I'm going to call it Eritrea. On land formerly controlled by Ethiopia and occupying much of present-day Somalia as well. Its military presence particularly ramped up following an 1887 battle when some 500 Italian soldiers were killed in an ambush. So that's just setting the stage for Italy's particular portion of the their part in terms of this. After this accord, I'm trekking Italy's descent into Africa and trying to get their own colony.
So they go in.
Yep.
And then what happens?
They basically go in and they start taking up territory, mostly on the coast.
And they were ambushed?
Yes. So in 1887, there was an ambush by local resistors, not necessarily what the full story of this is about. I'm just setting the stage that there was resistance, just like there was resistance throughout.
Okay, yeah. So I didn't know. So it's just the fact that they weren't taking it lying down.
Yes,
I didn't know if this was now going to be used and sensationalized by the Italians.
Yes,
to say,
in order to say,
now they're going to get it. Like, look,
that's exactly what happened. Yes, so that's definitely part of that. Okay. Now we're going to flash forward 2 years. In 1889, Italy signs a treaty with Ethiopia's then emperor, Menelik II, who recognized the Italian claim to the port city in exchange for a loan of arms and money. Now, this has kind of been happening through a lot of
Did the Pope own the land to begin with, to recognize the claim, to exchange anything? How does that work?
Well, it's like I said. So Italy essentially gets a foothold in Africa. They take the northern parts of Ethiopia. For whatever reason, instead of pressing on and trying to take the entirety of the country, they butt up against this emperor, Menelik II, and he is able to have a sit down with Italy and actually broker a peace treaty without actually having significant battles at this point.
But they had an ambush or a couple ambushes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There were ambushes, yes.
And they're like, so the idea of civil unrest, insurrection isn't new. And they're like, we don't want this.
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
Listen, pacify your population. This is the deal. Or we can be brutal and you can try and resist. It's going to be bloody for everyone. Don't do this to your people, dear emperor. Yeah. Think of the people type thing. Is that
well, I think I think that there's resistance. And I think Italy, unlike the other European powers at this time, is not fully joined up. Now, you can kind of say the same thing for Germany. I think Germany has a similar issue, but Italy has a lot of political strife at the time in terms of like calling itself Italy, because if anyone knows the history of Italy, it was Italian city-states, and it was a long time of warring between those Italian city-states before you got any kind of unification. So this is sort of a fledgling early Italy as Italy, as this Italian state.
Interests might not have been as unified and firm.
I feel like
at any given moment.
Right. Yeah. I feel like it would have been very difficult to convince the newly united Italian people that we are going to cost Italian lives trying to take.
If one city-state suffered losses more than others, they'd be like, dude, you send them. And you're like, I don't have them.
You're
something
the big
like
guy.
That. Yeah.
So we definitely have to say that. Now, it doesn't take away to the fact that they were a power. So they definitely had military arms. They were Italy. It was still Italy. It's just we're just saying that the appetite. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. 100 years from now, if we went back and said, well, why did America invade Syria? It's not because we couldn't. It's because we had already done Iraq, Afghanistan, and the appetite of telling the American people that we're going to go into another desert battle doesn't feel, we can all sense that it's not something that most people are going to be like, oh yeah, let's do this. Let's go for a third one. Italy was in a similar place just to set the stage. That's where Italy was. So they were like, if we get this colony, or if we could colonize by having a foothold here and broker a peace treaty for with the main power of this area, we'll settle for that.
I'm curious too. I don't know if you know any of this, because obviously there was a slave trade and there was some element of footholds across different African properties.
Yes.
I wonder if the big guys, I'm sure known resources were definitely a factor in prioritizing who got what, but also what has already been somewhat conquered. Where relationships have been somewhat forged, or things were known more than some unknown areas. Is a place like Ethiopia, was that less known, less conquered in the way that we would think about it from the slave trade? And did a lesser power like Italy get it because of that? And so it was more difficult for them?
No, I wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't say that, because again, it's not as if any of the European powers had forts and slave ports, but they didn't necessarily have an area of Africa at this point that they
is setting up a port even difficult. Like even that, is that like a huge starting point for a country rather than having nothing?
Yeah, it may be. Maybe we could say that. I mean, it's hard to answer that.
I don't want to overestimate. I don't want to blow it out of proportion. I was just curious if
I'm just saying it wasn't enough prior to this for, let's say, Great Britain to just say, okay, we had a couple of slave forts on the western coast. Let's use that as a stepping point in order to just do this on our own. You still needed that meeting. That's what I'm saying. Everyone still had to agree to go in at once, because there was still this understanding that if you went in piecemeal, not only are you grabbing more than maybe is available to other European powers, therefore you're opening yourself up to war with another European power, plus having to quell the resistance of the locals. There was very much a tiptoeing of, Italy was like, if I'm taking this part, the rest of the European powers were like, all right, we're staying out of that area, because we don't want to go to war with Italy.
That is kind of just dawning on me, the idea that not only are they agreeing to borders and, not fighting with one another, but the idea that we have to do it all at the same time to diminish Africa's ability to fight on multiple fronts. Like they can't divert resources. If they have to defend every front at once, we're just going to spread them super thin.
Yeah.
And they can't help out one another because they can't afford to lighten up their own borders, their own border defenses. That is, wow. That just kind of dawned on me.
Diabolical, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Wow. It's cruel, man. It's not a game. It's not a story. It happened. That's really cruel.
So that treaty that they signed eventually fell apart when Emperor Menelik realized the Italian translation of the treaty made Ethiopia a protectorate state of Italy, essentially subjugating them to Italian rule, which definitely plays into, instead of bleeding, why don't we just sign this piece of paper that has them give us this land with them ruling it, but basically paying tribute. So like Australia, Italian monarch or whatever, their money is, they're using our money. They're they have to pay taxes to us because now they're a part of Italy that most likely would have been an unfair relationship, because they're a protectorate. So Italy protects them in exchange for whatever Italy needs, essentially. So they get the resources without actually having to conquer the land.
So at this point, I'm gonna say that I am fairly ignorant, especially across all of Africa, as to where they were around 1870, 1885, right? Whatever, 1900, 1914, where we were, right? I mean, court systems and different Western institutions and the way that we think about them, signing contracts and all this kind of stuff. Has Africa adopted this? Did they come up with it on their own? Something very similar? Like, did they understand what?
This isn't like white man lands on Pocahontas, like those Native American shores. Native Americans are like, they have no concept of land ownership, and that's another kind of thing that I feel is a myth.
Well, that's why I'm calling it out. I want that cleared up.
The African rulers at this time are modernized. I mean, they've had hundreds of years of interactions with the white man. Like it's not.
Or I'd even want to say that like Western world is the one that rubbed off on them. Like, we talked about various things popping up. Like, did they formulate their own that's very similar, and so they understand all these concepts, like they get it.
Yeah.
So this is more they're like strong-armed into this.
Well, I mean,
they choice.
Well, I think Menelik was being self-protectionist. He was saying, "Look, if I don't have to go to war with Italy, and I get to maintain sovereignty, I'll sign this because I don't care." It's what they've taken
sovereignty, as in like you're a puppet king.
No. Well, that's where he drew the line. He was like, "I'm not a puppet. I'm an emperor," and he was like, if you want this, you got to come take this." So, I mean, this is a movie. I mean, I'm shocked that we have not. Well, I'm not shocked. Or I know why we haven't got this movie. But if this were happening, I don't know. If Vikings were invading, we probably would have gotten this movie. Because this dude is like that. That's where it falls apart. He's like, "Hey, my version is not the same as your version." Obviously, he has someone who could speak Italian in his court, and he's like, "What you've proposed here is not what you've told me we're agreeing to." And so basically he tells them to shove that and he says, if you want this, come and take it. Okay. Now
it's pretty badass.
I'm sure a lot of leaders have similar stories. It's just that this is one that gets told because, spoiler alert, he wins in the end. But let's get to that because it's a really cool crescendo to how this happens. So Menelik's line, and I really hope I'm saying this right. I should have probably looked at how you pronounce that. But his line claimed to be, which you mentioned earlier, claimed to be descendants of King Solomon. And I don't know if anyone knows, but Ethiopia has had a long tradition to, I think they're like Ethiopian Jews. I mean, there's a big thing between the Old Testament Bible.
There's a lot of interesting stuff. There are relics that they claim to have, special temples and stuff.
So
it's really interesting.
With the biblical, they're like the lost tribe of. We're not biblical scholars, but if you look it up, Ethiopia has a cherished history even among Christians, especially at this time period, for being within the fold, which he uses to his advantage. So it's only important because he was able to actually garner some support as a Christian from European sympathizers. Swiss-born engineer Alfred, can't speak Swiss, it's LLG, no real idea how to pronounce that. Alfred Luge?
I'm going to say something silent there.
Probably. For example, served as Menelik's de facto chief of staff, and he actually helped him with the modernization of his country in terms of upping the infrastructure. And during the trips back to Europe, reportedly promoted Ethiopia as Africa's Switzerland during this period.
That's interesting. And you had mentioned sympathizers, because that is always something that goes through my head, because people often kind of, I don't want to say cop out, but give themselves a mental crutch to say, well, it was the times. It was, that's how people thought.
Yeah.
And I often wonder, like, how
it's not true.
Yeah. How universal were these concepts where they're like, yeah, slaughter everyone, get it?
Yeah.
Like, because again, it wasn't the time of photography and the way that we think about it now, where everything was publicized. You just didn't have media access.
There was photography, but there was.
I know, but it wasn't media access in the way.
It wasn't social media.
Yeah, because wasn't like the Revolutionary War or the Civil War. That was one of the first big photograph wars, right? So, and that's when you saw the true slaughter. So,
that definitely helped. Yeah, definitely helped.
So I mean, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that you have to wonder, one, how much the people actually knew, and then whether they knew or not, like what could people stomach? Where was their moral compass at the time? What was a norm? I mean, you would hear stories about people going to see executions. So, how sickened were people by that versus that's what everyone went to do? Like
I said, there was a lot. That's what's amazing. There was so much PR by the Western powers at this time back home to justify what they were doing, because slavery had just come to an end. For the most part, slavery was now outlawed almost throughout all of Europe. I think the Portuguese and Brazil, I know they kept slavery much longer than most people, but for the most part, at this juncture, slavery was now viewed as a moral sickness pervasively, and so you definitely have that. So I'm just saying, so that now to say, all right, we freed these slaves, but we're gonna go invade their homeland. That you had to do some sort of PR. You had to do a campaign to say why we're able to do this.
Slavery's bad, but this is war.
But this, well, this is bringing democracy and civilization. I don't know where we've heard that before, but we were bringing democracy
liberate them
for the undemocratic. We were civilizing these backwards people and saving them basically.
So not to derail your thing now, but going back, because I am actually really curious about this. So you had sympathizers, you had people who understood that this was morally wrong and reprehensible. How did they get the information? Were there journalists that were there feeding it back, writing about it? Like how does the public at home get the real story that a PR campaign would even feel compelled to counter? Like
Emperor Menelik was like an ambassador. He actually frequented many of Europe's establishments and courts. And here's a quote. Queen Victoria was actually quoted at this time to have called Menelik a down-to-earth monarch with a charming, magnetic personality. Which, again, that should be another upheaval to the idea that Africans are isolated, doing their own thing, and then Europe just comes in and invades. They're very much a part of the world. You have monarchs sitting down with these emperors and kings as almost as equals prior to colonization. And so it's not as if they're foreign entities, just like they don't know, like it's not like the white man has come from the shores. We don't know what to call them. We don't know their language. This is a very different period. They do know their languages. They have Swiss engineers working their infrastructure. They visited Queen Victoria's court. This is a man who was well versed on the world of Europe when they decided to come calling and knocking on his door to take him over.
God, I mean, and again, I don't want to frame it like this because I don't want to assume relationships, but the atrocity and the horrendousness aside of what actually they intended to do, was there any sense of betrayal? Like, hey, we were friends?
That I don't know. To be honest, none of the articles that I did read ahead of this mentioned anything about that. And again, it's all about sources. We're getting stuff in English. I don't know. Maybe if we're from that part of the world, maybe if this history was the kind of history that was studied over and over again in the West, and we were learning about this in school, we'd have a more nuanced approach. It's not as if initially when we first learned about Abraham Lincoln, we knew everything about him. It's through tons of Lincoln movies, tons of people's diaries, learning about his wife. It's because we do these deep dives that you can answer those types of questions. If we were reading journals and things like that in school, then I would have a better answer to that. But this isn't things that you would normally learn about or is readily being studied for a number of reasons. And I think that's
a great answer. I think that's a great answer. Wouldn't it be great to know?
It would be great to know.
Wouldn't that be cool if we knew that? Yeah.
There we go. Going on. But words don't win wars. During his rise to power, Menelik had viciously mutilated rival Ethiopians, branded slaves with the sign of the cross, destroyed mosques, and encouraged pillaging. Nonetheless, with the Italians presenting a common threat, Menelik united the country's fractious provincial rulers behind him when he called for a mass mobilization in September of 1895. He was able to raise around 80,000 to 120,000 troops, with men pouring in from almost all of Ethiopia's regions and ethnic groups.
That just speaks to, because if I'm sure that even the things you listed are not just the tip of the iceberg, but don't do it justice, the atrocities that took place in infighting in that country. But that just shows you what a threat it must have been for him to say, but them. Like, we need to unite to stop this from happening because this is going to be the end of us.
Menelik, you killed my mother, but I'm not going to let these Italians enslave us. So you have my gun and my sword. That's exactly.
But it shows you too. I mean, it goes back to, this wasn't people coming ashore for the first time. There was previous knowledge. They understood. They probably to some degree experienced the horrors that would have unfolded if they gave in.
Well,
It wasn't
because everybody knew what happened to slaves.
exactly.
This is well-known stuff by this point.
Because in South America that didn't happen, right? People welcomed them in. That there wasn't this like unification right away to mass an army and fight them off the shores. Like it just didn't happen that way. There's no previous knowledge. So I think I wanted to call out because it proves your point even more for anyone that didn't know the full context of what the environment was, what the situation was, is that clearly they knew. Otherwise there probably wouldn't have been a significant amount of doubt, especially amongst divisions that didn't really care for one another.
Right. Which is why that's such an important point to bring up. But I also, this is another thing that I didn't necessarily write down, but speaks to what we've kind of been circling around, and is not mentioned, not by any of the journalists or any of the articles of the topic. Ethiopia is able to mount a defense by mobilizing a significant army, but most of the African slaves came from the West. So a lot of the depletion that we're talking about in terms of manpower, like human capital, was out of the West and south of the country. You have a place that did not necessarily get as decimated by the slave trade in the East, and they're able to amass, even though and I'm using quotes, people, even though technologically inferior, are able to amass a significant enough army to basically give a European power pause, because Italy kind of gets screwed. they kind of are the ones to take on the rest of everyone is taking on the rest of the. But that
goes back to what I was saying.
They got the horns.
That's what I was saying before. If they weren't already previously conquered, did lesser European powers get saddled with them? That's kind of what I was going to before. Did Italy get Ethiopia because they hadn't been previously conquered?
Well,
they didn't have as much pull.
I think they were just the last of the seed. They were encouraged to do this after others had already said,
"Yeah, Italy, come on in. You get Ethiopia."
Well, why don't you? Or you're right. It could have been so diabolical to be like, "Why don't you occupy the Ethiopians?" That would be some. That's some 4D chess right there for the rest of European to be like, you know what.
We don't want these people to be mercenary out to fight us.
Exactly. Let's sacrifice Italy. So like there's like basically you have that initial meeting and then you have another meeting that happens after that it's like that Zoom call that ends.
You stay on for an extra couple minutes. Bye, Italy.
Hey, could you just hang on? Just everyone else but Italy. Could you just hang on for 2 more minutes here? All right. So we're setting them in, right? They're going to Ethiopia because we don't want to deal with that. We're going to take over the part that we've been ravaging for the past 400 years. We wish them luck. We hope they can do well over there, but just occupy those people because we're not doing that ourselves. We don't want that blemish on our record. Yeah. So continuing, as Italy advanced through Ethiopia, Menelik marched his army north to meet them, covering around 600 miles. This was more ground than Sherman's march to the sea, Americans, if you know that Civil War history, or Napoleon's invasion of Russia, which, if anyone knows about that, was, he basically marched his army almost to death, trying to take Russia during the winter. Not something you want to do. Pressed into it. Now, there's much more to the war effort here, and I encourage listeners to read the full article that I'm referencing, or Raymond Jonas's Battle of Adwa, African Victory in the Age of Empire. So I got to flash forward here. There's so much that goes on in terms of little skirmishes, battles, how this war effort takes place. If I flash forward to the decisive Battle of Adwa on March 1st, 1896, where the fighting broke out, the Italians and their African auxiliaries quickly found themselves disorganized, highly outnumbered, and exposed in inhospitable terrain. By day's end, they were in full retreat, leaving behind their artillery, and roughly 3,000 prisoners were captured. Menelik outsmarted and outflanked the Italians in every respect, according to historians of the article. Also, we can continue. I'm going to continue a little bit more.
I mean, it's really interesting because they know the terrain, but they're no fools either. I mean, It's not a matter of, well, I know my neighborhood better. I can go through the little holes and crevices here and there, but strategically, they're strategic. They have plenty of militant art. Like they know what they're doing.
Right. which speaks to the art of war. I'm saying, like, it's not as if Europeans knew warfare and Africans didn't. They both know warfare, and when you're coming in, the odds are somewhat equal. Even if you have superior military might, you can still end up on the losing end of a battle, which is what happened to Italy. Many women contributed to the victory as well, serving as water distributors, medical care providers, prison guards, and morale boosters. Taitu, don't know if I'm pronouncing that either, Taytu, Menelik's wife, herself commanded her own personal army during the battle. Now, this woman actually could have a story onto herself as well, because she was a ardent hater of Europeans, essentially, and was kind of pivotal in terms of the rallying cry.
I could just imagine
for Ethiopia
the home life
to
there.
unite against the Europeans. Yeah.
The arguments that they would have their home life, where he's got to like go over and be a diplomat.
It's like, you're visiting
Queen people over.
He's like, you're visiting Victoria again. It's like that, that cursed whore.
That's funny.
Now, the Italian prisoners were eventually released, but any Africans that fought alongside them had their right hands and left feet amputated. So, I mean, this guy wasn't, he's not a saint, all right? This guy's kind of...
Well, when you said they marched that far, I'm like, wow, what did he do to make them go? At some point, someone was like, I'm tired, I want to turn back. So, yeah. Wow.
Now, to finish this out, Menelik's victory had farther-ranging consequences as well. Before Adwa, according to Hale, this I'm referencing the article again, a Morehouse professor in African studies, Europeans generally thought of Africans as primitive savages who would all be ruled over and eventually displaced by Europeans. That's something that people don't really know about, that it wasn't just an idea that they were going to conquer Africa. It was kind of an idea that they were kind of going to exterminate them. They were going to replace them. They were going to be the new Africans. Europeans were now going to just inhabit Africa. That was a motive. That was an idea at the time.
So but there wasn't a sentiment of we're going to help or assimilate.
That was some of the PR, yes,
or raise them. But
there was an underlying ideology of we're here to exterminate as well.
Was it? I do want to know if you have the specifics in terms of, was it exterminate or was it displace? But I don't really care where they go.
Fair. If I could be being hyperbolic. Sure, it could have been.
Well, because that's
a
crazy. Because that goes back to what is the mindset of people of the day, and to be okay with mass genocide.
Which to the point of extermination.
To the point of extermination. Yeah, but then for it to be like something where they're like, yeah, we're gonna commit mass genocide to the point of extermination. Like we're gonna drive them extinct.
Well, I mean, we're talking about the issues with the crowd. That this is sort of the Elizabeth controversies that we're talking. Because you have mass genocides happening under her watch. Is she aware of it? People around her are. So her generals are. They're okay with it.
People I think that leaders are incentivized to a degree to. I mean, they're the ones making those decisions, so I can't really justify anything they do. But the public who is
I mean, I don't know. I can't speak
disconnected from any real reward from this.
Yeah.
They're common people, man. Like normally people aren't cool with that. At least I think. I don't know. I don't want to.
I can't speak. You're right.
I
can't speak
on
now,
anyone.
I mean,
you're saying that the general public, like if they were to take a Gallup poll back in 1875 in Europe, people are like, yeah, we're gonna wipe them off the map.
I think that we need to understand that racism, is entrenched. I mean, it's racism has been going on for the better part of modern Europe at this point. I mean, I don't know how far.
And so is racism like I'm superior? I know I'm going to ask some silly questions right now, so apologize. Is it racism? We're superior to that race, or racism? They don't deserve to live.
You're right. I mean, are we getting Holocaust racism, or are we getting run-of-the-mill race, like Mexican immigrant racism? We don't want to.
I'm not trying to. I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to insult anyone.
I mean,
I'm trying to get a genuine feel for the sentiment.
It's an interesting question. I think that's it's probably something that either a scholar or a book could get. I mean, it's not something I probably can answer. I mean, I want to, but I can't answer.
Another
with any
wish
scholarly
wish there was truer history. Like, and that's a fine answer because it should be frustrating, and it should speak to how do we have this gap. We know so much detail about certain things that are beneficial to the narrative to know, but then the dark things that are uncomfortable to deal with, we coincidentally aren't, we don't have any recording of that. Sorry. So we
don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable, and we don't want anyone to feel guilty. So
yeah, I mean, that's what's driving me crazy is that I want to know this stuff, and I'm kind of craving for it, and I just don't. Doesn't seem like anyone knows.
So just to wrap this story up, Europeans generally thought of Africans as primitive savages who would all be ruled over and eventually displaced by Europeans. But afterwards, Hale says, Europeans were forced to take Africans much more seriously, even as racist attitudes remained entrenched. And that's sort of a brief overview, very top level.
I wonder if it was part of a selling point too, because even in modern war, even in World War II, and from what I understand, again, this is propaganda that I've heard, in the reversal where the Japanese thought the Western peoples were going to be pushovers, and I won't go into the racisms of all of that, but they thought it was going to be an easy win. And we do the same thing. It's going to be easy, right? We're technologically superior, the thing you were alluding to before. So I wonder if that was playing a role to kind of garner support. Like, yeah, we're going to go in and do this. It's a huge continent. It's going to be a big thing. But guys, it's us. We got the Navy. We got the Army. We got the guns. We're going to go in and steamroll everyone. They're primitive. Like, I wonder if it was part of trying to get the public behind them in a way. Now, as I say that out loud, I'm almost like, do they need it? I mean, these are monarchies and emperors. Like, do they need the public support in that sense?
Yes, actually. That's another interesting thing that if you watch Johnny Harris's video, he does get into. Prior to that convention or to that meeting, the reason the European powers actually decide to hold that meeting is because they're scared of all the revolutions that had been happening up until that point. So it is the fear of monarchies and those in power that basically are saying, all right, we got to do something drastic in order to get the people kind of back on our side, because we don't necessarily like this whole idea of democracy. And we're definitely feeling our power starting to slip away. So it was also.
So they created an other.
That's exactly right.
For everyone to rally against.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a part of it. Maybe that answers a little more of the questioning, but I can't answer specifically, but he does cover that aspect in the video.
No, I mean, yeah, we would need a scholar to kind of comment on that, and I'm sure I'd get a swift correction in the way that I'm thinking about it, but I'm asking questions, that's all. Hopefully no one's offended. I'm just asking questions.
No, that's what this pod's about. It's about probing and asking questions. Now, I do have another aspect. I do want to go back to the video because I think that there is it's a little later in the video that he says a couple of things that I want your take on, because I had a bristle. Even though I like the video and I like what he's doing here, but I had a few opinions on this.
The barista served you some bitter coffee?
He did. It was some Starbucks level coffee. Guys,
if you see the video, that he's giving off barista vibes. He's got the beanie and everything. It
was like Bert. But anyway, I thought that was before I get back into that. I was just like, that's the story. I mean, that's the story of how Ethiopia resisted colonization. And I do have to say one other point. If you go out there, listener, and you start researching this, you will run into articles out there that sort of chide Ethiopia's not moniker, but title as being one of the only African nations never to be colonized. And what they'll reference is the fact that Mussolini, during the Second World War, reinvades Ethiopia and annexes it. But that's not colonization. And the reason I'm going to put that out there, and the reason I'm going to call that out and say that that's just factually inaccurate, is because if I were to tell you that France was colonized during World War II, you would say, well, that's not how that happened. You VC France. I mean, they were invaded.
It's a good analogy.
Because it's the same war.
Good example.
Right. It's the same war. So to say that they were eventually colonized in World War II, you're only saying it because it's an African nation that happened to have been captured during World War
Crimea,
II. Right,
or Eastern Ukraine.
Yes, you could say exactly. You could say Russia is trying to colonize Ukraine if you're going to use that logic, which you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same. That's why I'm going to call that out. But you will run into that. And I'm just going to debunk that right out. That's ridiculous. They are the only ones to resist colonization during a period of colonization.
That is incredible. So was it that massive army? I mean, was that it? Was that whatever the result of those series of battles that happened? That was like Italy saying, forget it.
That's it. Yeah. In fact, they actually put their leader at the time on trial as a result of this failure. He was eventually acquitted, but it was a big deal in Italy. Like they were like
for losing. I mean,
yeah, well, yes. Well, being the only European power to have to walk home after trying this. Yeah. So
interesting. I mean, I not for any atrocities, not for for human rights issues.
No,
for losing.
For losing.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, he got a lot of people killed and captured. So, all right, I'm going to play this for you.
Making it the only place in Africa to never be colonized. But listen, in the midst of all this bloodshed, we have to talk about something that doesn't fit cleanly into our narrative of good versus evil. Because the presence of these Europeans in this continent also brought really positive things. Remember those French dudes that discovered the treatment for malaria? Well, that was tested in the field in French Algeria, a colony. It changed medicine forever, giving us our modern understanding of mosquitoes and the diseases they spread. This scramble into Africa helped push forward our understanding of health and disease and medicine. These and tons of other medical developments helped these Europeans conquer land, but it also brought innovation that we still use today that has saved countless lives.
I mean, this goes into...
Wait. Before you say anything, I got to say this now. Now, this is how I have to upend it. Sorry, not upend. I just have to say, now, everything you just heard, listener, imagine if I said the Nazis of World War II Germany weren't all that bad. It wasn't just about good and evil, because if they didn't do what they did, we wouldn't have the space program. We wouldn't have NASA. We wouldn't have the internet. As a result of the Holocaust and the Nazis, all the modern technology, all the trappings of modern technology we have today, may never have come to pass. I mean, that's what eventually I went into, because I was like, that to me is the exact same thing. I feel like you could say the exact same thing if anyone does. By the way, historically, we took 120 Nazi scientists during World War II, gave them amnesty in order to create our space program. I think I need to say that in case anyone doesn't know that as a listener. So I feel to me they were equatable, and I feel like you could only say something like that because, again, you could take liberties with Africa that you cannot necessarily take with a European nation in a similar circumstance. That was I just have to say that before you framed it. That was my framing. Now, what do you think? What are you saying?
I mean, I think you're spot on. As he was talking, I had to do everything to just be quiet and not interrupted, because I don't even know what you would call it. That type of rationalizing, that type of like silver lining to evil deeds that people have a habit of doing sometimes, it just really annoys me. The idea that just because it happened that way, that you can't imagine that it would have happened any other way. You have the luxury of that's just the only way we know that it happened. You have to rob the alternatives that they could have ended with a similar outcome is, I mean, it's almost like you're pretending to be a psychic. It's just, it's crummy. I don't buy into it. But then you hear the argument of, and this is arguably true, that warfare drives certain innovations. And I will cede that you can see out of necessity and out of forcing it could happen faster. But then I would challenge you to say that, okay, so if someone gave you the choice ahead of time and said, if you sacrifice 1 million people, you could have rockets 20 years sooner, would you do it?
That's a good point too. I like that. That's a good point. I do enjoy that. That's a good one. Because that's basically what he's saying. And the reason we know he's saying, and I think it's,
we would have gotten around to it, dude. We would have gotten around to it.
Well, there is a what if.
Look at what we did with COVID. We would have gotten around to it. If we needed it, if it became the goal of the generation or the people in charge, it's just a matter of prioritization. We're human beings. We're super adaptive and innovative. We can do it. anything that we would have needed, we would have gotten done. War forces certain technological things that society didn't know it needed or need at the time. And so, yes, you could say that it does drive that, but if you were to know the cost up front, I challenge you to make the same decision. You'll get these things eventually. I don't know. That just bothers me.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, the only other thing I was going to add is that as soon as he said that, I didn't even bring it into this, but I was like, wait, I know malaria is still a massive issue. First of all, it is. I mean, right? There's still Africans dying of malaria today. But then I was like, wait, let me just type this in. Where have we come in terms of natural immunity to malaria? And there was an article, there was a peer review paper in like 2016 that is starting to track and document in Africa, in Eastern Africa specifically, that basically there is starting to get a buildup of complete immunity to malaria. Now, granted, we're many years removed from the 19th century, but to say that it wouldn't have happened on its own, we know it would have happened on its own. Like we're already starting to find evidence that it would have happened on its own. That's just one little aspect. Your point is a better point. I will say that
there could have been another reason other than war, other than colonization, other than field testing on a population you just subjugated to give you that outcome. Clearly it was possible. Like that's the thing. It's not like, we invaded, so aliens came down to reward us with special knowledge we could never have found out on our own. No, we did it. There was just the motivation to do it. So I don't know, guys. Next time, like, just we can do it anyway. It's God, man. In an alternate universe, you would have the opportunity to say, "Wow, we just waited another like 2 months. We would have gotten it for some unknown reason." Like, It's just like screw that logic and screw that silver lining.
Well, there's more. Well, yeah. Well, there's more to that silver lining as well. Is the fact that because of the way we got it, which is through this coercive means testing on people who had no choice, it also spread a lot of myths with regard to how Black people, how African, like how medicine is basically conducted and treated when you're looking at people of color. The whole framework of medicine having primarily been practiced on men and not women. I mean, we have so many injurious aspects to these innovations that he was touting as a result of the means to which they came about, that I just feel like and he's a smart guy. I mean, he knows this. I just feel like it is so weird to make that claim, to get to that connection, knowing that the way in which you do something can have ramifications on how it's applied. And that's just another aspect of it. I'd be remiss not to point out and not to highlight. So.
And I'm going to throw this one out there. Because you see the celebration of these stories. If you pay attention, you'll see inventors or people who have done great things for society talk about their immigrant ancestry, their slavery ancestry. Okay, so you made the trade, 1 million people for 20 years earlier. What did you just rob us of with the intellectual property that you just wiped off the map? What did those people have the potential to give us?
That's a really good point. I mean, there we go. We're talking about that human capital. Yeah, there you go.
It's infuriating. I mean,
I don't buy into America as well. Yeah, but anyway, yeah.
I don't buy into it.
Yeah. So anyway, I couldn't let it go. I wanted to let it go because I was like, the overall video is pretty good, but I was like, I feel like that's that blind spot that happens. You have someone else telling another culture's another people's story, and that's that sort of that. Not derisiveness, but it's sort of like it's that ability to sort of take liberties and just say, well, it was horrible, but look what we've gotten. And I started
got
with
something out of it. Like, congratulations that you got something out of it. Right. I mean,
because those people did it. That's the thing. Just to highlight and say that Africa got the medicine as a result of that. It's again, we don't know. And like you said, you have an African slave teaching about the way of inoculating against smallpox. So to say that Africa couldn't have come up with these on their own, anyway, we know this. Don't want to get pulled down into it.
Maybe if you didn't rob them of intellectual capacity during slavery,
you would have known.
and then done it again during colonization,
Exactly.
that maybe they would have built upon
something
the
even better.
previous institutional knowledge of smallpox inoculation, and they would have gotten to it. Maybe, just maybe, if you never enslaved the population to begin with, we could have had the malaria vaccine even sooner than colonization.
That's right. You never
maybe.
do. Yeah, you never
Maybe.
know. That's a better. I like that. Maybe better. That's a better way of framing it. Anyway, that's why that's what I had to bring today. This is our last Black History episode for 2023, and I hope I made it a good one. I hope it was a doozy.
That was excellent. That was absolutely excellent. Bravo. You stuck the landing again, sir. All right. So, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. Wow, that was enlightening for me. I love these episodes. I love the episodes when I'm part of the show and I actually learn something. So that's pretty awesome. I'm like one of you. So don't forget, we have new YouTube content every week. So please like, subscribe, enjoy the show. We're also on Twitter and every podcast platform you can think of. So hit us up, give us a listen.
And with that, we bid you a retraction out.